The failure to act with sufficient ambition to avert the climate catastrophe will be the greatest moral failure of our time.
Making changes takes courage, and if we don't change things, we won't have a future.
I'm an environmentalist. A lot of people don't understand that. I think I know more about the environment than most people.
You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. Change is coming, whether you like it or not.
Zero Carbon
East Talk. Hello and welcome to Zero Carbonista. I'm Ian Collins. Today I think we're recording episode 12 of what we'd like to think is a little more than just some mild education. Crucial, in fact. If you know the drill, you'll be aware this series is all about the views, the thoughts, campaigns and ideas of one man. Dale Vince, entrepreneur and environmentalist, built his success in the green energy sector. He's the owner of Ecotricity, the world's first green energy company, an area he identified years before it was remotely on the political agenda, let alone dominating world events. On each episode we'll bring you the salient issues from the biggest agenda on the planet right now, the environment and climate change. And of course, Dale, this has all taken a bit of a turn, and we established it I think in the last episode because of what is happening with coronavirus, because almost every element of this feeds into so much of what you've been talking about for years.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, what's really interesting is, despite the kind of tragedy and impact of the virus, what we can see from it is that there's a different way to live, and we can see these enormous upsides if we start driving less, flying less and all that kind of stuff. I mean, the drop in pollution is incredible. The return of wildlife, the cleanness of the skies, as well as the smell of the air, we're getting all of that. And then there's actual hard data coming out of America that suggests that the virus in China has saved more lives than it's taken by reducing air pollution, tens of thousands of lives.
Yeah, I mean, that's extraordinary, isn't it? So this is as a result of people not doing what they would ordinarily be doing, whether that is industry firing up enormous chimneys and goodness knows what, flowing out all manner of poison, or whether it's about car journeys, put all that together, it's actually saved more lives than those that died of coronavirus.
Yeah, that's right. And it's obviously, I say obviously, but it's visible from space. NASA published pictures of this a couple of weeks ago, actually, and the lack of pollution is visible from satellites. It really is quite big, and we're feeling it here in Britain as well. The skies are clear; they're not crisscrossed by airplane contrails. People with breathing problems are reporting that they're feeling better. That the air smells clean because hardly any of us are driving anywhere. And there's a massive reduction in the burning of fossil fuels, which in this country is responsible for about 40,000 premature deaths every year, which is hopefully a far bigger impact than the virus will have, and yet they're treated in very different terms. We have a COBRA and national emergency in effect for the virus, but we have for air quality, nothing. Actually, we're in breach of EU law. We have been for years, and the government don't have a plan to get us out of it, because the plan requires this kind of response, the virus kind of response, where we stop doing the things that we normally do. There's no other way.
It's an interesting kind of juxtaposition, isn't it? Public Health England, which of course is an arm of Her Majesty's government, the last time I looked, are willing to give out those numbers. Air pollution kills between 20,000 and 40,000 Brits a year. They've got that on record as saying that. You can go to their website, the government website, and establish that. And yet essentially the same people that are responsible for giving us that headline are also responsible for doing nothing about it.
Yeah, that's right. It's an abdication of responsibility. And not just that, because that's immediate. That is killing up to 40,000 people a year. But linked to that, of course, is the failure to tackle the climate crisis, which is going to bring much more pain than the virus or this air pollution problem will bring. It's going to cause the most incredible upheaval to life as we know it, and not tackling that, having signed up to Paris, having committed to being a zero carbon country. These things go hand in glove, actually, because obviously air pollution is a byproduct of the activities that are driving climate change. It's burning fossil fuels at an unbelievable rate. It's polluting our air and water and driving the climate change.
Yeah, we'll come back to a couple more points on this in a second. Let's just do a question here from Phil on Facebook. It says, hello Dale, more important things are going on in the world right now, but do you have an update on the crowd fund? I put £20 in. Can you explain then, Dale, what he's talking about and what the update is?
Yeah, we launched a crowd fund to bring a legal challenge against the government. We've got national energy planning policy in our country is about 10 years old. It predates those two very big commitments, the Paris Accord and becoming zero carbon as a country by 2050, both legally binding commitments. And what we've said to the government is planning policy for energy is out of date. It's off the back of the Heathrow decision, where an appeal court made exactly that ruling, that planning policy for airports was out of date on that basis. And we launched a crowdfunder to pay for that. The update is that we've raised nearly £80,000, which is incredible. And we'll be able to bring this case and probably do more with it. But I think it's really relevant. There are, as you say, Phil, more important things going on, but in some ways there are not, because we will come out of this virus in a few months' time, and there will be a temptation to get back to business as usual on the part of governments and big businesses, airports and that kind of stuff. And it's so important that we challenge energy policy. At the moment, there's a presumption in favour of fossil-fueled energy projects, which is incredible. It's ridiculous, and we have to change that. There has to be a presumption against fossil fuel projects and for renewables. So it's really important, actually, that we continue with this.
It's interesting what this is going to do to, if you like, the human condition and the way we do business as human beings, both in our own kind of world and families and the like, and of course from a government level as well. And it seems I'm hearing people say actually nothing's going to change, where in fact it could even be worse, because as soon as this is all over and the neon lights of McDonald's and KFC and all those retail outlets light up like Romero zombies, we'll be straight back to the shopping centres, straight back doing what we like to do best. There'll be a spending splurge on all manner of things. So I'm hearing that view, and I don't know whether that's some people just speaking about what they would like to see, but I'm also hearing the view that you're articulating here, and that is that actually this will be a game changer. In fact, even if people aren't considering it, governments will have no choice but to consider this.
Yeah, I don't think we can take it for granted that it will be a game changer, but I think we have to take the opportunity to make sure people remember what we've done at this time of the climate crisis, how we've come together as a country, the scale of the changes we've made, the sums of money that we've invested to protect relatively few lives compared to the climate crisis, and to take that and flip it into future behavior. Challenging energy policy is one important part of that. But I do think that politics will change as a result of this, because we've come together as a country and we've experienced this together. There's been a huge outpouring of support for the NHS, for example. You know, those disgraceful 10 years of austerity, which saw the NHS spending cut, to historically low levels. That I don't think that can ever happen again. I think the Tories, the government, are going to have to change how they treat the country, how they treat the NHS and the social care system, and all those other things that really are the fabric of society. I think we will get different politics as a result.
Another aspect, Dale, of coronavirus, I mean, headlines like, will coronavirus kill the fossil fuel industry? What are you making of that?
Yeah, it comes back to our legal case, really, to change planning policy to a degree. You know, we have to remove the presumption in favour of fossil fuel burning power stations. In a couple of days, the government are going to make a decision on something quite unbelievable. It's an open cast coal mine in Britain. I mean, why on earth is that even in consideration? It's been about 4 years in planning, and the government will announce the decision soon. Hopefully they'll turn it down, but you can't be sure. Because the other aspect of fossil fuels, big consumption that we have, is through motor vehicles. We can see that changing already. The electrification of the car and the van and the HGV, that's all coming. But planes are the difficult frontier. But even there, electrification of short-haul planes is coming. Boeing and Airbus, if they survive this, are saying that they'll have short-haul electric flights in about 10 years' time. And for the long stuff, we have to absolutely reduce it to a minimum that we need, the long-haul flights. But we can use synthetic jet fuel that is genuinely carbon neutral to make that acceptable. So we can have a world in which we fly the distances where there's no other reasonable means to do that. But we don't do it frivolously. We don't, fly to Europe for 50 quid at the weekend because we can. There's a world in which we can take fossil fuels out of transport, is what I'm trying to say. And we can take it out of energy as well, the production of electricity for homes and business.
Let's go to another question. Janet on Twitter says, found your podcast after hearing you on the BBC. Do you really think this crisis can help change the planet for good? I mean, you've talked about this and quite a lot as well in the last episode, Dale, and we just touched on it, whether human behaviour will say, actually, I quite like the sense of change that we're experiencing, even if it's against the backdrop of tragedy. We would be able to have this going forward without the terrible reasoning for it. We could have a positive reason why the world looks a little different.
Yeah, I do think that it's possible because it's giving us all the time to reflect and to, take a look at the stuff that we used to do and used to take for granted, to revalue stuff. And it is happening against a background of tragedy. But is it avoiding a bigger tragedy, such as with the data coming out of China that says less people have died because of air pollution than have died because of the virus? And if you look at the cleaning of the air over China, I mean, that's ginormous. What's suffering to bring this about is the economy, but that gives us a chance to question our approach to economics. The view that it's okay to burn stuff and pollute the planet and to use stuff endlessly in order to achieve economic growth. Do we really need it?
You'd think this would be the area, this would be the thing, as it were, that did change people's minds. And maybe some people are uninformed, some people are perhaps lazy, other people just simply don't believe it. But if this can't, if something like a killer virus that's snaking its way around the planet, killing tens of thousands of people, and as we record this today, there's over 1 million people that have tested positive for coronavirus. If that can't change things, then one has to sadly conclude, Dale, that maybe nothing can.
Well, I'd actually, what I'm going to say here is that I think climate change will. If we haven't changed in time to avoid climate change, then that will change. It will be just like this virus response. It will be right in our faces. It will be inescapable and unarguable. And then governments around the world will have to do mad things to try and mitigate the worst of that. But I do think some of the changes that have happened in the last few months are going to be structurally difficult to quickly resuscitate. So today I read that Heathrow is shutting one of their runways. So they've just been and had the third runway ruled illegal because of basically climate change commitments by our country. And now the virus has caused them to shut down one of the 2 runways. 80% of all planes in the world are grounded. And it's going to take years, I think, for the airline industry to recover from this, assuming that demand comes back to normal from the people. And I hope that it doesn't, and I think that it probably won't. So I think there'll be some really big structural changes to how we live. Behavioural changes, really, which will make it difficult for the bad behaviours to come back quickly. And the longer they take to come back, the more chance we have of preventing it.
Before we carry on, I think we should have a Trump montage.
We have it totally under control. It's one person coming in from China. We think we have it very well under control. We pretty much shut it down. Coming in from China. In April, supposedly it dies with the hotter weather. When it gets warm, historically, that has been able to kill the virus. People are getting better. They're all getting better. And the 15 within a couple of days is going to be down to close to 0. It's going to disappear. One day, it's like a miracle. It will disappear, and you'll be fine. They're going to have vaccines, I think, relatively soon. Not only the vaccines, but the therapies. Therapies is sort of another word for cure. We're talking about very small numbers in the United States. Our numbers are lower than just about anybody. It's really working out. And a lot of good things are going to happen. And we are responding with great speed and professionalism. It's going to go away. Yeah, no, I don't take responsibility at all. We're going to all be great. We're going to be so good. This came up, we came up so suddenly. This is a pandemic. I felt it was a pandemic long before it was called a pandemic. All you had to do is look at other countries. The coronavirus, you know that, right? Coronavirus. And this is their new hoax. We're 15 people in this massive country. And because of the fact that we went early. We could have had a lot more than that. We're doing great. Our country is doing so great.
And what's interesting, just hearing that, Dale, is that America now has more cases and more deaths than anywhere else. I mean, I appreciate it's a huge country, but so is China, and America are not faring particularly well.
I think there's probably 3 times as many people in China, actually.
Yeah.
And testing in America is probably at some of the lowest levels in the Western world. So the true extent of the virus there will be much higher. Testing in China was, far more intense than it's been in America. I think Donald Trump started out, didn't he, by denying that the virus was real. He called it a hoax, and then he denied that it would be serious. And he's made all sorts of mistakes along the way. And it does look like America. It is the epicenter of it now, but it does look like America will suffer potentially the worst of any country in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think his comment that, we've got 5 cases, we'll get that down next week. And of course, that clearly did not happen.
I was going to say, not wanting passengers to disembark from cruise liners because it would affect his numbers badly. That's what he said.
Yeah, that's another stratosphere, isn't it? Alan on Twitter says, heard you on TalkSport, Dale. There's no way footballers should be getting government financial support. Just explain for those who aren't familiar with what you said, Dale, and for those who don't know, of course, you are the chairman of Forest Green Rovers, like any other professional football club you are at the moment. We're not in isolation in the viral sense of the word, but footballing has stopped, of course.
Yeah, that's right. We're in lockdown like all other sports. I was on TalkSport and 5 Live earlier this week just talking about this. What Premier League gets a lot of media attention in terms of what they're doing. And most recently it was Spurs using the government's furlough scheme for their 550 non-football employees. And that's caused a bit of a hoo-ha around the country, people saying, look, the owner of Spurs is a billionaire, he shouldn't be doing this. And I get that. The point I was making was that those 550 people are as entitled as anybody else to be a part of that government job-saving scheme. So on that basis, I don't have a problem with it. What it's not is, at the moment, support for Premiership players, because actually the sums involved are so tiny compared to what they're paid. I'm not sure they'll ever bother to do that. So it's not the wage support being applied to Premiership players, it's to staff of Premiership clubs.
Here's another question. This is from Charlie. He says, do you reckon we'll see a proper end to the current football season?
I do, actually. My best guess is that we will, that it's too important to continuity to let it go. I think the hope will be that it can be played at the start of the summer, leaving room to have a short gap and then start the new season at the end of the summer. That appears to be the current hope. But it all depends on the progress of the virus and the success of the lockdown and that kind of stuff. So it's really hard to say.
Yeah. And finally, Toby says, how much did you pay for those billboards? Saw them on my way into London one morning last week. Just explain, we did touch on it on the last episode, Dale. Just explain what the billboards are and why he wants to know how much you paid for them.
Yeah, somebody gave us about 50 billboards for a few days, and on them we plastered a very simple message: there is another way to live, and it comes out of our reading of the impact of this virus, and how it's giving us all the chance to see a different way to live, where we don't drive around madly every day and we don't fly around the world madly every day and that kind of stuff, and we can see pollution dropping and wildlife coming back and that kind of stuff. And it's a simple message to people. It looks quite eerie, actually, when the roads are deserted. We've seen some pictures. It looks like a slightly ambiguous message. There is another way to live, but we hope it has some impact. The few people that see it, we hope it gives them cause for thought.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, everything's about awareness, isn't it? And whether it's you arguing with Mike Graham on Talk Radio, you've had some, dare I use the word, some absolutely beautiful moments with Mike Graham, and I'm absolutely convinced that if you and him went for a pint, you'd get on really well together. It's one of those curious relationships.
We do get on well, actually.
Yeah, but fundamentally in very different places on the issue of the climate. You're back on with him at some point soon, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. Maybe in a few days' time, because he's taken exception to me repeating the claim that up to 40,000 people a year are dying from air pollution in Britain every year, and that's a scandal, and we're treating it differently, obviously, to the virus crisis and stuff. So he said, where's the data for that? And as you said at the top of this show, that's actually government data. So I'll be sharing that with him. But yeah, it's a bit of a kind of left-right ding-dong that we have meeting, but I like him, and it's a chance to speak to him and to his audience. So
yeah, and he's got a huge audience as well. So
yeah, I'm pleased to be able to speak to them.
Look forward to the next one. Dale, that's it for this episode. We'll speak on the next one.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ian.
Don't forget, of course, if you want to subscribe to this podcast, it is free, of course, and make sure you leave a review on there as well. Really important last bit. Do follow Dale on social media, twitter.com/DaleVince, facebook.com/DaleVince, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Zero Carbon
East of